At 75 years old, Don Johnson has finally decided to say the thing that people have been waiting nearly 3 decades to hear. He is the man who defined the visual language of the 1980s, the smoothest face of a television revolution that forever altered the way we perceive masculinity, fashion, and fame. Yet for all those decades of commanding the spotlight, he has spent much of his time deflecting the most intimate questions about his life, particularly those involving Melanie Griffith. But now, with the score long since settled, the tabloid noise finally gone quiet, he is finally talking. What he is revealing about why he and Melanie divorced not once but twice is the story that nobody ever fully told. To understand the man who would eventually rule the neon-soaked streets of Miami, you have to look past the Ferrari and the Armani suits and find the red dirt of Flat Creek, Missouri. Donnie Wayne Johnson was born on December 15, 1949, into a world that offered very little in the way of safety nets or soft landings. His mother was only 16 when he arrived. His father was 19. They were essentially children attempting to raise a child, and the structural strain of that impossible math manifested in every corner of his upbringing. When the family relocated to Wichita, Kansas, the shadows of instability followed them. His parents divorced when he was 12, and by the age of 16, the restlessness in his soul became so great that he walked away from home entirely. He has often described his childhood with a single, carefully chosen word: unhappy. It wasn't destroyed, and it wasn't dramatic in the way Hollywood scripts might portray it. It was simply a boy who needed far more than the people around him were capable of providing. What saved him was a drama class he took in high school for extra credits, not because he harbored a secret passion for the stage, but because he was looking for an easy path to graduation. But his teacher saw a natural, raw gravity in him and cast him as Tony in West Side Story. The moment he stood under those stage lights, something in the universe clicked into place. He has described that experience with an almost uncomfortable level of honesty, noting that the audience was showing him a form of love that more than made up for the emotional nourishment he lacked at home. This was not a metaphor. It was a profound psychological transaction. It defined the next 60 years of his life, a permanent hunger for the validation of the masses and the agonizing difficulty of finding that same sense of fulfillment in any room smaller than a crowded theater. He took that hunger to the University of Kansas on a partial drama scholarship, then migrated toward the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, eventually landing in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. He arrived with very little money, but an immense, almost dangerous amount of nerve. In 1975, he landed a Saturn Award for Best Actor for A Boy and His Dog, a cult post-apocalyptic film that earned him a reputation as a serious, albeit eccentric talent. However, the rest of that decade was a long, gritty hustle for roles that never quite added up to a career. Then, in 1984, the world changed overnight. Miami Vice was never supposed to be the cultural titan it became. The pilot was famously dismissed in an NBC memo as TV cops, and it wasn't intended as a compliment. But when Detective Sonny Crockett first appeared on screen, he redefined the visual and sonic landscape of American television. Don Johnson became more than an actor. He became a cultural phenomenon. The 3-day stubble, the pet alligator named Elvis, and the high-end loafers became a total cultural takeover. High fashion houses began studying the show for direction, and Don's salary reflected his newfound power. He started at $30,000 per episode, but by the peak of the show's run, he was earning $150,000, winning a Golden Globe and an Emmy nomination, and gracing the cover of every major magazine in the Western world. During this era, he also began drinking with a consistency that he now describes with the detached precision of a man discussing a stranger from his past. A typical day, he once admitted, involved a case of beer, several martinis, multiple bottles of wine and cognac after dinner. He didn't view this as a crisis. He viewed it as a baseline. When Miami Vice finally concluded in 1989, Don refused to disappear. He kept pushing, starring in films like The Hot Spot and Tin Cup. But his second major act came in 1996 with Nash Bridges. This time, he wasn't just the talent, he was the architect. He negotiated a deal as an executive producer that gave him 50% ownership of the show's copyright if it ran for more than 66 episodes. It ran for 122. That backstage ownership deal eventually led to a massive $23 million lawsuit victory in his favor, a moment of real vindication for the kid from Missouri who had learned to play the Hollywood game better than the moguls themselves. When Nash Bridges ended in 2001, Don found himself in that particular limbo that awaits stars who have been enormous twice and are now between chapters. The 2000s were quieter, characterized by guest spots and smaller films as the industry decided his era had been categorized. But then, in 2012, Quentin Tarantino called casting him as Big Daddy in Django Unchained. It was a performance of real comic and menacing precision, and it reminded the industry that the talent was still there, waiting for the right frame. He followed this with a scene-stealing role in Rian Johnson's Knives Out in 2019 and a gritty antagonistic performance in Netflix's Rebel Ridge in 2024. At nearly 75, he is currently starring in Ryan Murphy's Dr. Odyssey, commanding a luxury cruise ship with the same mixture of authority and charm that has been his trademark since 1984. Yet the career is only half the story. You cannot understand Don Johnson without understanding Melanie Griffith. They met in 1972 on the set of the Harrod Experiment. He was 22, she was 14. She was the daughter of Tippi Hedren, a child of Hollywood royalty who had grown up amidst a particular blend of glamour and dysfunction. Despite her age, Don famously remarked that she was more woman than anyone he had ever met. Within a year, a 15-year-old Melanie had moved in with him. Their first marriage in 1976 was a chaotic, impulsive event that lasted only 6 months. Melanie once explained the logic with a candor that remains devastating. "I got married in order to end the relationship. It was an admission of two people who were profoundly addicted to one another, but lacked the maturity to exist in the same space. They could not be together, and they could not stay apart." After their first divorce, both moved on. Melanie married Stephen Bauer, and Don entered a long relationship with Patty D'Arbanville, with whom he had his son Jesse. It was Patty who eventually forced Don into rehab in 1983, stopping the structural drinking that had become his only way to fill the hollow spaces left by his childhood. Then came the high-profile relationship with Barbra Streisand in the late 80s, a collision of two massive egos and two immense talents that generated its own gravitational field in the tabloids. Streisand described him as compelling and difficult, a man whose life was moving in a direction she simply couldn't follow. In early 1989, as Miami Vice was entering its final season, Don and Melanie found each other again. The gravity between them had never truly resolved, and they married for a second time in June of that year. Their daughter, Dakota Johnson, was born shortly after. For a few years, they were something that functioned. They made films together and appeared as a united front, but the second chance was ultimately a cruelty. It didn't represent a new failure. It revealed that the first failure was a signal they had ignored. By 1994, the drinking and the internal demons were winning again. Two people trying to stay sober while staying married in the glare of the Hollywood sun proved to be an impossible task. Melanie filed for divorce in 1994, and it was finalized in 1996. Now at 75, Don Johnson has arrived at a place of shocking honesty. He has said that a bad marriage will age you, and he admits that he had to live through two bad marriages with the same woman to finally understand what he was looking for. The redemption of his story lies in his 25-year marriage to Kelly Flegger, a woman who offered him trust, kindness, and respect, the three things he had previously traded for intensity and chaos. He and Melanie remain genuine friends today, showing up together for Dakota, who has become one of the most successful actresses of her generation. There is something in Don's face now, not nostalgia, but an honest cousin to it, an acknowledgement that what he and Melanie had was real, even if it was broken. He admits that love doesn't die, it just changes and becomes something else. The kid from Flat Creek, Missouri, who first found love in the sound of an audience applauding, finally found it in the quiet of a stable home. He didn't just survive the neon lights, he outlasted them, proving that the most important role he would ever play was the one he found when the cameras finally stopped rolling. The journey through the decades for Don Johnson was never just about the fame or the box office numbers. It was a psychological trek through the wilderness of his own identity. In the mid-'80s, when he was the biggest star on the planet, he lived in a world where he couldn't walk down a street without being mobbed by thousands of people. He was the icon of an era that prized excess and aesthetic perfection over emotional vulnerability. He lived in the middle of a hurricane, and the only way he knew how to survive the wind was to numb himself against it. He has spoken about those years of vice fame with a sense of wonder and exhaustion, noting that the pressure to maintain the image of Sonny Crockett was a weight that nearly broke him. He was a man playing a role that the entire world wanted him to be, while he himself was still a teenager from Missouri, searching for a father figure in every director he worked with. His relationship with Melanie Griffith was the mirror he used to see himself. Because she had known him before the Ferrari and the fame, she was the only person who could see through the tan and the stubble to the boy beneath. But they were both wounded in ways that made a stable partnership impossible during their youth. They were two magnets that either pulled together with a force that crushed them or pushed apart with a force that sent them into separate orbits. The second marriage was a desperate attempt to prove that they had outgrown their ghosts. They wanted so badly to believe that maturity had replaced the volatility, but the volatility was part of the attraction. When they divorced the second time, it wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a long, painful education. What Don Johnson discovered in the years after Melanie was that the adrenaline of a chaotic life is a poor substitute for the peace of a stable one. His marriage to Kelly Flegger in 1999 marked a definitive border in his life. He moved away from the transactional love of the audience and toward the unconditional love of a family. He became a father again, and this time he was present for it. He watched Dakota grow into a powerhouse of her own, a woman who possesses her mother's warmth and her father's effortless cool, but with a self-possession that neither of them had at her age. Dakota's success in the 50 Shades franchise and her subsequent turn toward prestige independent cinema is something Don speaks of with a pride that is palpable. He sees in her the successful synthesis of the two people who loved each other so much they had to marry twice just to make sure it wouldn't work. In his later years, the roles he has chosen reflect a man who is comfortable in his own skin. In Django Unchained, he played a man of the old world with a wicked sense of humor. In Knives Out, he played the entitled, slightly ridiculous modern patriarch. In Rebel Ridge, he played the face of systemic corruption. These aren't the roles of a man trying to look 40. These are the roles of a man who knows exactly who he is at 75. He has embraced the gray, the lines on his face, and the wisdom that only comes from having burned your life down a few times and lived to tell the tale. He often says that he is the luckiest man alive, not because of the millions or the gold records, but because he finally found a way to be happy in a quiet room. The story of Don Johnson is ultimately a story about the long road to self-awareness. It's about a man who was given everything the world says you should want: money, fame, beauty, and the adoration of millions, and realized that none of it was as valuable as the three words he now lives by: trust, kindness, and respect. He is a survivor of the Hollywood machine, a man who navigated the highest peaks and the lowest valleys, and came out the other side with his soul intact. When he is photographed today with Kelly, or when he is seen laughing with Melanie at a premiere for Dakota, you see a man who has finally settled the score. The hunger that Tony felt on that stage in Wichita all those years ago has finally been fed not by the applause of strangers, but by the quiet loyalty of the people who truly know him. He remains a style icon, of course. People still ask him about the linen suits and the loafers. They still want a piece of that 80s magic. And he gives it to them with a wink and a smile. But he knows that Sonny Crockett was just a costume. The real Don Johnson is the man who stays home, the man who cherishes his children, and the man who realized that the most important thing he ever did was decide to stop being the perfect man, the 1980s invented, and start being a real man instead. He is a testament to the fact that you can have a second act and a third, and that if you are brave enough to tell the truth about your failures, you can eventually build a life that is actually worth living. As he looks toward the future with potential reboots of his classic shows in the air and new projects constantly on the horizon, he does so with a sense of calm. He doesn't need the work to define him anymore. He works because he enjoys the craft, because he likes the camaraderie of a set, and because he still has something to say as an actor. But when the director calls cut, he is ready to go home. He is no longer the restless kid from Flat Creek. He is a patriarch, a legend, and a man who has finally found his peace. The King of Cool has traded his crown for a much more comfortable hat, and he has never looked better. The lessons he learned from his time with Melanie, the pain of the addiction, and the chaos of the peak years have all been forged into a perspective that is both generous and grounded. He doesn't regret the marriages. He views them as the necessary fires he had to walk through to become the man he is today. And in the end, that is the most compelling story of all. Through the prism of his 75 years, Don Johnson represents a bridge between the old Hollywood of untouchable gods and the new Hollywood of human vulnerability. He survived the transition, and he did it with a level of grace that few thought possible when he was throwing bottles and insults in the mid-90s. He is the living proof that a human being is a work in progress, and that the final version is only reached after the ego has been dismantled and rebuilt. He has found his rhythm, and it is a steady, soulful beat that doesn't need a Billboard chart to validate it. Don Johnson has survived his own legend, and in doing so, he has become a much greater one. His legacy is not just the fashion or the cool cars or the iconic themes by Jan Hammer. His legacy is the woman his daughter has become, the stability of his current marriage, and the honesty with which he now views his own past. He has turned the transaction of fame into a legacy of substance. He has shown us that it is possible to be the most famous man on earth and still find your way back to your own soul. The pastel prince has grown into a silver-haired statesman, and the world is still watching. But this time, they are watching the man, not the suit. And the man, at 75, is finally ready to be seen. In the quiet moments away from the sets and the press tours, Don Johnson reflects on the sheer improbability of his life. From the dirt of Missouri to the heights of Hollywood, it has been a journey characterized by extreme friction and extreme rewards. He acknowledges that he made plenty of mistakes, that he hurt people he loved, and that he spent a long time being a man he didn't particularly like. But he also knows that he never stopped trying to be better. He never stopped looking for the steadiness that he didn't get as a child. And finding it at 50 with Kelly Flieger was the ultimate victory. It wasn't too late. It was exactly on time. His relationship with his children, Jesse, from Patty Dakota, from Melanie, and his 3 children with Kelly, is the anchor of his existence. He has managed to create a blended family that actually works a feat that is perhaps more impressive than any Oscar or Golden Globe. They all show up for each other. They support each other. They are the proof that the Johnson chaos was eventually replaced by Johnson harmony. When Dakota speaks about her father, she does so with a mixture of awe and humor, recognizing the legendary figure he is to the world, but also the deeply human, sometimes ridiculous father he is to her. She is his greatest production, and he knows it. As the sun sets on another day in his 75th year, Don Johnson can look at his reflection and see more than just the ghost of Sonny Crockett. He sees a man who survived the storm, who learned how to navigate the waves, and who finally found a safe harbor. He is the kid who left home at 16 and finally found his way back to a place that feels like home. The thirst for love that Tony felt on that stage in Wichita has been quenched, not by the roar of the crowd, but by the quiet voices of his family in the kitchen. He is a man who had to become a legend before he could figure out how to be a person, but he got there. And in the end, that is the only story that matters. The linen suits have been retired, the Ferrari has been sold, and the stubble has turned to a distinguished silver. but the spirit of Don Johnson remains as vibrant as ever. He is a man who has lived 100 lives in one, and he is finally happy with the one he is in. He has settled the score, he has told the truth, and he has found his peace. At 75, the King of Cool is finally, truly himself, and that more than anything else is the ultimate fashion statement. He has shown us that the most important thing you can wear is the truth of your own experience, and he wears it with a style that no Armani suit could ever match. The journey is far from over, but the destination has been reached. Don Johnson is home. In the final accounting of his life, the neon of the 1980s will always be a part of his story, a bright, vibrating chapter that the world will never forget. But it is the chapters written in the late 90s and the 2000s that carry the most weight. These were the years of reconstruction, the years when he decided that he didn't want to be a casualty of his own success. He fought for his sobriety, he fought for his children, and he fought for his right to be seen as more than just a style icon. He succeeded in all of those battles. He proved that he was a businessman, a producer, a serious actor, and a devoted father. He took the transactional love he discovered in Wichita and transformed it into a legacy of integrity. When he talks to the young actors of today, he tells them that the fame is a trap, that the adulation is a drug, and that the only thing that will keep you upright when the wind starts to blow is the foundation you build away from the cameras. He tells them to find a Kelly Flegger, to find a reason to go home, and to never mistake the applause for the truth. He speaks with the authority of a man who has been to the mountaintop and saw that it was empty, and who then found his treasure in the valley below. He is a mentor, a statesman, and a survivor. And so we leave Don Johnson at 75, a man who has finally said the thing people have been waiting to hear. He has admitted that the path was bumpy, that the marriages were hard, and that he was his own worst enemy for a long time. But he has also shown us that the bumpy night eventually leads to a calm morning if you are willing to fasten your seatbelts and stay for the whole ride. He is the kid from Missouri who conquered the world and then decided the world wasn't enough. He is a legend, but he is also a man. And at the end of the day, that is the only role that ever truly mattered. He has done it. He has made it. He is Don Johnson, and he has never been more alive. The audience is still there, of course. They always will be. They are still watching, still fascinated, still drawn to that magnetic presence that hasn't dimmed with age. But Don isn't performing for them anymore. He is living for himself, for his family, and for the simple, profound joy of another day in a life that he fought so hard to reclaim. The lights are still on, but the man on stage is finally real, and that is the most beautiful story of all. The curtain hasn't fallen. It has simply risen on a final act that is filled with light laughter and a peace that passes all understanding. The score is settled, the truth is out, and Don Johnson is exactly where he's supposed to be. At the end of this journey, we see a man whose name will always be synonymous with a specific kind of American cool. But we also see a man whose heart is the true source of his power. He has outlasted the trends, outlived the critics, and outmaneuvered the demons. He is a beacon of resilience in a town that often breaks the best of them. He stands as a reminder that your childhood doesn't have to be your destiny, and that your mistakes don't have to be your epitaph. You can change, you can grow, you can find your way home. Don Johnson did. And as he celebrates his 75th year, he does so with the knowledge that the best is not behind him. It is right here in the quiet, in the truth, and in the love that he finally learned how to keep. The legend is true, but the man is even better. He is home, he is happy, and he is finally, beautifully Don Johnson.